there are 2 games going on. The Rose Bowl presented by Capital One. That's the one that's out of Arlington this year. Remember, they moved the location because of COVID. So number 1, Alabama taking on number 4, Notre Dame there. And then the All-State Sugar Bowl down in New Orleans. That's Clemson taking on Ohio State, number 2 versus number 3. Now, we've broken down the games a little bit. We'll continue to do that. And I know that there's been argument ad nauseum about playoff expansion, but I think today's probably a pretty good day to look at it, because I asked Peter Burns earlier the question on Monday, are we going to be saying that A&M should be in? I didn't ask that because I necessarily think Texas A&M is going to would make a difference in this, but I'm afraid that we might get 2 games that end up a little lopsided, and a reminder of how good the Bama and Clemson are, and then we're going to get a national championship that is the same that we've had every year. I don't have a problem with that, but if we're going to do that, then the process needs to be as amazing as possible. And I've always been a 4 teams in guy, Mark, but I think this year has really changed my mindset on that. As a former player, where are you on college football playoff expansion?
Well, I think it's going to affect a small number of teams regardless, right? It'll still be the top teams that are getting in. However, I like the idea of expansion, because what it does is it makes the college football playoffs, the actual playoffs, more exciting. I mean, this year, ideally, I think this first round, people would love to have a back-to-back matchup of Alabama versus Clemson and then Ohio State versus Notre Dame. You just feel like those would be 2 better games if those were the matchups. But then the problem is you feel like you don't have the 2 best teams playing in the championship game. What expanding the playoffs would do is allow more of those really good matchups, because I think that just the way things go and the recruiting numbers and just you're still going to get the best players going to the best schools, right? I mean, it's kind of like in Major League Baseball where you don't have franchises that just have way more money and they're able to get better players. It's the same type of thing right now in college football, where the best players are going to still go to Alabama and Clemson. So, to me, if you expand the playoffs, not only do you allow a chance for a group of 5 team to get in, maybe even you just have the highest rated overall group of 5 get in just automatically. So there's always one. And then you get really the winner of each Power 5 conference in there. And then, a couple, a wild card or whatever you want to call them, teams get in there too. So, I mean, I think it could be awesome to expand, and you get a lot more competitive games.
For me, this is a nostalgic day. And, for anybody that doesn't know, I'm 43, right? So I think,
you don't
I'm
look
43.
it. You look so fantastic.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I've gotten to that spot where people now add to your age. That you look great for your age. Like that's where I am.
The question that sorry, to digress. You're 43, and people say you're great. But do people like when you're 30, like, man, you look great for your age? Because I think they did probably for you. I think they,
People have always thought I was young.
There you go. There you go.
My dad got good genes. Gave me good genes. My dad's a young-looking guy. So, for me, growing up as a kid, this day, New Year's Day, was significant. Because I didn't grow up, even though so much of my work now is in college football, I didn't grow up a college football fan in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. It's just on the West Coast, it wasn't a big deal when I was a kid. But New Year's Day was still the day that you sat down and you watched every bowl game. Because you saw matchups you weren't going to see anywhere. And bowl games had tremendous relevance. Now, we've obviously seen one of the effects of the college football playoff is that realistically, bowl games just have less punch. Many of them have less sort of power and emphasis behind them because the meaning isn't the same with them. So part of my mind turns around and says, what are we looking for? Because in certain sports, like the NFL's objective is not to crown the best team. The NFL's objective is to have an exciting product that gives everybody a chance at the Super Bowl. Look no further than when the Patriots were undefeated and most of America was rooting against them in the Super Bowl, right? Like, we're not looking to reward excellence in the NFL. The college football playoff system is meant to give us the 4 best teams, and ultimately the hope is the best champion. I think most of the time they get it right with the best champion particularly. It just doesn't have as much excitement because there are so few teams. So the 2 trickle-down effects from expansion that I think are important is, number 1, you mentioned recruiting. I do think that over the years it would broaden out the ability for some schools to get better recruits and spread some of that out. If you knew as a recruit that going to USC would still give you a shot at the Pac-12 championship, which gives you a shot at the playoffs, right? Like, there's all of these trickle-down effects. The other is that, like, I keep looking at the AAC and, like, the money that's been spent by Cincinnati and UCF and Memphis. Like, you're talking about, you're asking these schools to spend millions of dollars to build their programs. For what? Like, at this point, Cincinnati's going to go to their alumni and try and raise more money, I'm sure, to keep Luke Fickell happy. And if I'm alumni in there, I'm like, for what? Like, we go undefeated. We're not getting in the college football playoff. We don't even get that chance to have that big statement. They get a game against Georgia this weekend, but let's be real. If they beat Georgia, how many people are going to come out and say, well, Georgia wasn't really trying? So, like, at some point, no college football playoff expansion means we're asking a lot of schools to pay a lot of money for college football that don't really have the same impact and emphasis to the end of their season, even without a championship.
Yeah, no, and you're right. And I think there's definitely that concern, but it's also to just the expectation. It isn't until recently where Cincinnati fans are like, look, now our expectation is to go to the college football playoffs. Before it was like, let's have a productive season, let's win the AAC. I think that as teams continue to grow and as teams continue to separate themselves from the rest of their conference, you're going to get more and more expectations of making those playoffs. And I think financially, too, for some of these group of 5 schools, I mean, expansion and the amount of dollars that will come into your conference if you are one of those teams in the college football playoffs, I mean, it's astronomical. And it can really help improve facilities, pay for these coaches. So I think you're right. I mean, expansion would be fantastic, not only just because, yes, I think we'll still get the best team winning the championship, but you're going to have better games on the way to it. And I think that that's what's lacking in bowl season right now is picking matchups that will make good TV, good football, rather than being tied to conferences and trying to shoe in whoever falls next on the totem pole.